Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today it's time to dive back into SPFBO8 and have a quick look at the finalists. So as SPFBO8 moves into phase 2, we now have our 10 finalists, and we have about 6 months now where the 10 blogs or collaborations will read the 9 that they hadn't put forward to the final themselves, review them and give us our 8th SPFBO winner. My official involvement in the competition this year ended when I read my allocated 6 from the slush pile of 300 entries and put forward from them my semi-finalist, which Bookborn in turn then put forward to the final. Since then, a number of people have asked me if I'm going to read all of the finalists, and I've generally given answers ranging from no to I don't know to maybe, because I've not really been sure, but today I'm going to definitively answer that question. So my friend Cassidy from Covers with Cassidy has decided to put forward an alternative SPFBO final. She's gathered 9 other booktubers to join her in reading and reviewing each of the 10 finalists and scoring them in different categories to give a final mark out of 10, which will then be aggregated across the 10 readers. Cassidy has asked me to join her and be one of the 10 reviewers for this alternate final that she's put together. It's all just a bit of fun, not affiliated with SPFBO itself, but it does mean that yes, I will be reading the 10 finalists from this year's competition. Now I've got a bit of a head start in this endeavour because I've already read 3 of the finalists, reviewed 2 of them, and I will be reviewing the 3rd of those shortly. I just finished it a few days ago. But my first action for this read through is to take the 10 titles and put them into a table where I predict the ranking that I will end up with. So to do this, I've read the synopsis of the 10 books, being as impartial as possible, bearing in mind that I do know more than the synopsis for 3 of the books that I've read, and I've ranked the books from 1 to 10 based on those synopses, and that's what I'm going to go through today. So as I go through these, I'll put the cover on the screen. I'll refer to my Kindle where I've got both the cover and the synopsis for each of the books. I'll read through the synopsis and then give my thoughts on them, but I will go through these in order, starting with the book that I've predicted to end bottom of the pile and ending with my predicted favourite. So the first one, but in 10th position, is Small Miracles by Olivia Atwater. First of all, this cover does nothing for me whatsoever. I can tell by the type of cover that it's probably not going to be my sort of book, but also, even taking that into consideration, it really does nothing for me. It's just some black text on white and there's a couple of purple feathers on there, so it doesn't tell me anything, it doesn't give me anything, it doesn't do anything for me. As far as the synopsis goes, this is supposed to be a charming tale of little temptations. This feel-good comedy by fantasy author Olivia Atwater mixes angels, demons, romance and chocolate into a perfectly petty and wickedly entertaining novel. So for the synopsis itself, it says a little bit of sin is good for the soul. Gadriel, the fallen angel of petty temptations, has a bit of a gambling debt. Fortunately, her angelic bookie is happy to let her pay off the debts by doing what she does best. All Gadriel has to do is tempt miserably sinless mortal Holly Harker to do a few nice things for herself. What should be a cakewalk of a job soon runs into several roadblocks, however, as Miss Harker politely refuses every attempt at temptation from Gadriel the woman, Gadriel the man, and Gadriel the adorable fluffy kitten. When even chocolate fails to move Gadriel's target, the ex-guardian angel begins to suspect she's been conned, but Gadriel still remembers her previous job, and where petty temptations fail, small miracles might yet prevail. Olivia Atwater explores love, grief, and the very last bit of chocolate in this sweet modern fantasy, full of wit and heart. Pick up Small Miracles and enjoy a heavenly fairy tale from the author of Half a Soul. So based on that, my ideas from judging the book by the cover do seem to be well grounded. This does not sound like the sort of book that's for me whatsoever. If it wasn't for reading the SPFBO finalists, I would never pick this up in a million years, because it's just not for me at all. It is not my cup of tea. I'm hoping that it might give me something, but I'm not going to hold my breath for it. So I've put this one into 10th for a very good reason. It is absolutely as far from my type of fantasy as I think you can really get without actually moving out of the genre. So I am going to go into it with an open mind, as I am with all of these, and there is definitely a possibility that it won't finish in 10th, But as far as the synopsis goes, that's exactly where it's going to start. In ninth, I've got Scales and Sensibility by Stephanie Burgess, and this one is a far better cover. It tells me a lot more. It's still telling me that it's not the sort of book that I would generally tend to read. The series title is called Regency Dragons, and that kind of Regency England is not my fantasy at all. I like a completely different setting, and this is telling me that's not what I'm going to get here. As far as the synopsis goes, sensible, practical Eleanor Tregarth really did plan to be the model poor relation when she moved into Havergill Hall. She certainly never meant to kidnap her awful cousin Penelope's pet dragon. She never expected to fall in love with the shameless but surprisingly sweet fortune hunter who came to court Penelope. And she never dreamed that she would have to enter into an outrageous magical charade to save her younger sister's futures. However, even the most brilliant scholars of 1817 England still haven't ferreted out all the lurking secrets of rediscovered dragonkind, and even the most sensible of heroines can still make a reckless wish or two when she's pushed. Now Eleanor will have to find out just how rash and resourceful she can be when she sets aside all common sense. Maybe, just maybe, she'll even be impractical enough to win her own true love and a happily ever after, with the unpredictable and dangerous help of a magical creature who has adopted her. A frothy Regency rom-com full of pet dragons and magical misadventures, Scales and Sensibility is a full-length novel and the first in a series of standalone romantic comedies. So again, that synopsis really is a bit of a turn-off for me. It's not the sort of fantasy that I want to read and would normally pick up. Oddly enough, I do like a good rom-com when it comes to movies, so maybe there will be something to appeal to me here. But again, I really don't like real-world settings when I'm reading. If I read a fantasy book and it turns out that it is set in the real world and I didn't know it, I feel really betrayed. It is slightly better when I know this going in to the book. I know in advance that it's going to be set in a real-world setting. But even then, it just makes me not want to pick it up because I know that I don't generally enjoy it. So again, we'll see how this one goes, but Scales and Sensibility is starting off in my predictions in ninth. In eighth position, and we're still in the type of books that I wouldn't really enjoy. So this group of 10 isn't really best suited for a fantasy reader like myself. For number 8 though, I have put in A Song for the Void by Andrew C. Piazza. This one, the cover is quite interesting. I don't generally tend to read many ocean-based or sea-based stories. There don't tend to be a vast amount of them in fantasy, and that's pretty much the reason why. So this one has got a ship on it. There's some bats or something, birds of some description, that are flying either to or from this ship, and there's this big evil kind of red fiery kind of portal or an eye, I'm not quite sure what it is, in the sky there. So it's quite an atmospheric cover. It's again maybe not one that I would normally go for, but at least it doesn't have too many of the kind of tells that for me says the book itself isn't for me. That all comes up in the synopsis, however. A mind imprisoned is the greatest of hells. 1853, South China Sea. While on patrol between the Opium Wars, the crew of a steam frigate, HMS Charger, pursues a fleet of pirates that have been terrorising the waters surrounding Hong Kong. But now the hunters have become the hunted, something else has come to the South China Sea, something ancient and powerful and malevolent. Now the crew of the Charger must face their worst nightmares in order to survive the terrible creature they come to know as the Dark Star. A Song for the Void is a haunting, terrifying historical horror novel that will keep you turning the pages and jumping at the shadows. Readers who are interested in a historical adventure mixed with slow burn cosmic horror should take a closer look at A Song for the Void. I am neither of those readers. I'm not interested in historical adventure, and I don't do horror. I don't mind a bit of horror in my fantasy, but I don't do slow burn cosmic horror. None of that. Pretty much none of that synopsis in its entirety, let alone that last little couple of snippets, none of that appeals to me whatsoever. It's just that in this list, there are two others that appeal to me a little bit less. In 7th, I've gone with Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons by Quenby Olsen. This one's a quaint little cover, it's kind of cool. If it wasn't for the title, I guess really, this could be the sort of book that I would look at the cover and think, I can maybe do this one, it might be my cup of tea, it might be the sort of fantasy that I go for. It's a pretty cool dragon, I like the design on it. Let's see what we've got. As far as the synopsis goes, again, this tells me it's not really geared towards a reader like me, but we'll see where we go with it. Miss Mildred Percy inherits a dragon. But we've already got ahead of ourselves. Miss Mildred Percy is a spinster. She does not dance, she has a long stopped dreaming, and she certainly does not have adventurers. That is, until her great uncle has the audacity to leave her an inheritance, one that includes a dragon's egg. The egg, as eggs are wont to do, decides to hatch, and Miss Mildred Percy is suddenly thrust out of the role of spinster and general wallflower, and into the unprecedented position of spinster and keeper of dragons. But England has not seen a dragon since, well, ever. And now Mildred must contend with raising a dragon that should not exist, kindling a romance with a humble vicar, and embarking on an adventure she never thought could be hers for the taking. So again, lots of things in there that do not appeal to me whatsoever, but if there's one thing that does maybe appeal to me a little bit, or maybe kind of soften the blow slightly, it's the type of writing that you've got here, the type of humour that's coming through in that. It does definitely suit me, and I'm hoping that that's going to help to get me through this book, because again, you've got specific mentions of England, which is a real turn off when I'm reading fantasy. I don't want something that's set in the real world. I want to get lost in my imagination in a completely new world. So once more, I go into these with an open mind, but that's what we have with this one, and we're getting towards the top 5. But before we do that, we've got number 6. So for this one, I've put Trudy Sky's The 13th Hour, book 1 in The Cruel Gods. So this is a pretty cool cover. It is another one that tells me that it's not going to be the sort of book that I generally tend to read. And with this, I'm trying to forget everything I know, because this is the first of the books that I have actually read already. And even without that, I already knew bits about it before I did pick it up to read. So I know that this is kind of a gas lamp or steampunk kind of vibe. And the cover does definitely shout that. You've got the clock, which is kind of lit up in the background, and you've got the guy there wearing the glasses. It kind of tells me that this isn't my typical fantasy setting. Other than that, I do like the cover. I think it's a pretty cool design. It does tell me a little bit, it does draw me in a bit and intrigue me as to what I'm going to get here. So I think it's definitely one of the nicer covers that I've got. Let's have a look at the synopsis though. When the saints fail, the sinners step up. Cruel gods rule the steam-powered city of Chime, demanding worship and tribute from their mortal subjects. Kale lost her faith in them long ago and now seeks to protect vulnerable and downtrodden mortals from their gods' whims. But when Kale discovers powers that she didn't know she had and destroys a mortal soul by accident, she becomes Chime's most wanted. Quen's job was to pursue sinners until the vision started. Haunted by foreboding images of his beloved city's destruction, Quen hunts soul-sucking creatures made of aether, who prey on its citizens, and Kale is his number one target. To ensure Chime's future, Kale and Quen must discover the truth of Kale's divine abilities before the gods take matters into their own hands. For a city that bows to cruel gods, it'll take godless heathens to save it. And then there's a bit at the bottom that says The 13th Hour is the first book in the Cruel Gods series, a gaslamp fantasy featuring magical portals, gothic cosmic deities, quaint Britishisms, and steampunk vibes. This is an adult book containing strong language and mature themes that some readers may find disturbing. So although this is set in a fantasy world, it's got the quaint Britishisms, which I don't mind. I am British, and that doesn't bother me whatsoever because it's still in a fantasy world. There are a few things in here which don't really appeal to me. The gas lamp kind of setting, magical portals can be hit and miss for me. What else we got? Steampunk vibes doesn't really do it for me. But otherwise, there's not too much. It sounds interesting in terms of the gods and the way that they work. Steam-powered cities is a little bit beyond what I normally go for in terms of my level of industrialisation in the worlds that I like to read. But again, it's one that I'd go into with an open mind. The rest of it kind of sounds quite interesting, so that's why I ended up in 6th place for that one. In fifth, just ahead of it then and into the top half, I've put Mysterious Ways by Abby Evans. This is, I'm not really sure what to make of the cover. I don't really like the artwork style, but the kind of design overall does at least appeal a little bit. You've got a couple of, I don't know whether they're warriors, but it's two women who are holding swords and looking like they are potentially back to back, facing off against an enemy. So it's quite an interesting one. It is one that appeals to me, although I don't like the artwork style itself. As far as the synopsis goes, the goddess works in mysterious ways, and Isabella Varsalak intends to find out exactly what those ways are. As the commander of the 7th unit of the Solistopian City Watch, Isabella Varsalak has dealt with many a mystery. Murderers, burglars, con artists and troublesome demons have given her a multitude of crimes to solve over the years. But injustice in the way the world works is all around her. Innocent people suffer, guilty people triumph. When this is questioned, the only answer she receives is that the goddess works in mysterious ways. Determined to get to the bottom of what these ways are and solve the ultimate mystery, she sets off on a journey to find answers, but she'll have to go through hell to get them. Mysterious Ways is a fantasy novel set in a matriarchal world. Women are in power, they worship a goddess, and same-sex relationships are common and socially acceptable. So there's not actually too much that I get from that synopsis, because it is also a little bit repetitive. It tells you a couple of times that the goddess works in mysterious ways and she wants to find out what they are. And it is a bit strange as well that it gives her full name in the first 2 paragraphs. So I'm not quite sure that it's a synopsis that I like, but it at least tells me that it should be the sort of fantasy world that I like. It's definitely one that seems more suited to me than the ones that have come before it, but I've put it in 5th because it just doesn't tell me that much reading from that synopsis. In 4th is the second of the books that I've already read. This one is A Touch of Light by Thiago Abdella. The cover of this one is one that I've said several times before in other videos. I didn't really like too much, it didn't give me anything, but it's one that I like more and more the more I look at it. It's kind of, the more you look at it, the more you see, and I do like that. Every time you look at it, it gives you something new. Beyond that, it still doesn't really have too much about it until you look closely, so it's kind of middle of the road, I would say, really, as far as covers go. With regards to the synopsis though, a sprawling epic fantasy where religion and politics are one, griffin riders roam the skies, and a looming blight threatens to tear everything down. How far would you go to resurrect someone you love? Would you change who you are to show you belong? The world of Avarin is tearing itself apart. The domain worships life, its rulers lead eternal lives, and death is a shame that must not be mourned. For the clans of the south, however, death is all that keeps the earth alive. But old enemies are rising. A madness spreads throughout the domain, and Lynn, a rogue griffin rider in hiding, might be the only one who knows how to fight it. While Adrian, a domain prince seeking to bring his dead loved ones to worthiness, leads the domain armies against the madmen. The clans suffer a madness of their own as the land itself begins to wither away. Nasha, a cursed hunter and lifelong outcast, desperately fights for belonging in the Ronar, while her clan seeks to heal the land. Old beliefs will be challenged as the people of Avarin fight to save it before death comes for them all. So this is the type of synopsis that kind of does draw me in. It gives me a couple of characters, it gives me a couple of different scenarios, and then the idea that they're all going to get brought together probably towards the end of the book as it reaches its climax. It's got griffin riders, it's got clans, it's got battles that are promised through here, it's got mystery by the sounds of it as well. So again, this is one of the ones that's slightly difficult for me because I have read it, I do know exactly what the book is about, but based purely on the synopsis of it, I thought it's definitely one that should appeal to me. It's quite near the top of the list, and I'm glad to see that the top half of this 10 is made up of books that should theoretically suit me well. Into the top 3 then, and at number 3 I'm going with Tethered Spirits by T.A. Hernandez. This is one of those covers that doesn't really do it for me. It doesn't tell me anything. It kind of looks okay, I like the colours on it, but not really much else. There's not a lot that I get from this, and there's not a lot therefore that I can say for it. As far as the synopsis goes, this is one which is split into 3 parts again. So we've got a man with an unknown past. For years, Amar has travelled the Kavoran Empire seeking a way to recover his lost memories and end the curse that plagues him. With support from loyal friends, Amar may finally be on the verge of finding answers, but to do so he'll need to enlist the help of an unexpected guide. A girl afraid of her own powers. Kazari Azatarja, granted magical abilities through her bond with a spirit named Lucian. Haunted by past mistakes that have left her desperate to sever her bond, Kazari has her own reasons for agreeing to help Amar, but in doing so she may finally have to face the fears she's carried ever since leaving home. A woman on a vital mission. Meanwhile, a young refugee named Aleda is in hot pursuit, hoping the secret behind Amar's curse can save her brother from a fatal illness. With so much at stake and little left to lose, Aleda will stop at nothing to get what she wants. And when their paths collide, all 3 are set on a journey to unravel a mystery far deeper than they ever suspected. So this one in the synopsis is a lot more down my path than the cover is. It tells me obviously a lot more, that's what the synopsis is for. I'm not really sure on the way that they're split out. I don't like that they've got kind of a title for each of those 3 paragraphs, and when their paths collide it kind of sounds mysterious. It's the kind of thing that you generally do get in a multi-POV fantasy, but then by the sounds of it you've got a brother and sister as 2 of those 3, so they've probably already had their paths collide. And then you've got the description of the second one, kind of the middle paragraph. Sounds like it's very early on, so I don't know whether this is going to be more of a multi-person POV where they come together at the climax like I was describing for A Touch of Light, or whether they meet kind of early on and then they're going through the story from there. Either way, it does at least sound like something that I would hopefully enjoy. So then we've got number 2, and for this one I've chosen The Umbral Storm by Alec Hudson. I like this cover. I'm not generally a fan of these covers where it's got the artwork and it's got kind of design or border or whatever you call it, some shape with the title on it covering half of the artwork. The kind of scene that you've got here is one of those unrealistic ones where you've got someone with a big warhammer which is about 6 times too big as far as warhammers should be, because they are actually pretty small things, and in fantasy they tend to look more like this guy on the cover of Wrath by John Gwynne. But at least that one was being held by a giant, so that one does make a little bit more sense. But either way, that excluded, it's a pretty cool cover. I love this style of artwork. A lot of people don't like covers where you've got characters kind of looking at them, and this one deals with that by having them face away. You've got a dragon or a worm on there, so it ticks a lot of boxes, and it's definitely one that I do appreciate. As far as the synopsis goes, it says, 1,000 years ago the heart of the world was shattered, its fragments scattered across the lands. In the chaos that followed, martial orders arose to gather these shards, for it was found that great powers were granted when these pieces were bonded to the flesh of the chosen. These are the sharded few, warriors imbued with divine energies that once coursed through the heart and driven to absorb enough fragments to claim godhood. Darren has known nothing in his life except suffering. Orphaned at the edge of the realms, indentured to a cruel slaver, he can see little chance of escaping his circumstances, but elsewhere in the world ancient powers are stirring, new alliances threaten the peace of the old order, and in the cataclysms that are coming, a slave will become a hero. So this is the sort of synopsis that works for me because it gives me a little bit, it gives me a bit of mystery, it gives me a bit of intrigue, it tells me a bit about the world, but it doesn't actually tell me too much about the story. It leaves that for the book itself, but at the same time it seems like the sort of epic fantasy tale that I know and love. So definitely excited for this one. This is one of the titles that even before the competition started, I saw this cover and I took a look at it and I read the synopsis and thought, yeah, that's one that I like. So I'll put it on my want to read list because I do want to read it. So in that sense, I'm glad that it's reached the final and I'm taking on this endeavour so that I can read it with kind of an excuse rather than just waiting until the right time, which may or may not come. So definitely one that I'm looking forward to the most out of all of the finalists, because there is just one left in this particular list and I have already read it. So number 1 that I've put based on the synopsis is Fire of the Forebears by L.A. Buck. So this cover I do like. I like the artwork style. Again, it's one that, like the Umbral Storm, you've got the character but they're facing away. I like the text on it. I like that there's kind of more in there the more you look at it. It's a very detailed scene, even if it doesn't look like it necessarily from a first glance. But I like quite a lot about this cover. So when I saw this one, I included it in an upcoming fantasy releases kind of cover tier list video. And the author actually contacted me after seeing that, I presume, and offered me a review copy. I read the synopsis and said absolutely yes, because I really liked the sound of it. And that kind of helps me here because I have obviously read this one. This was the book that I put forward as a finalist, so I would hope that I like it. But I'm basing this ranking on these synopses, and I remembered that I really enjoyed the sound of it from the synopsis before I'd read the book. Reading the synopsis again to film this video, to put my 10 in their ranking, I was reminded why I liked it, because it's got a lot of the things that I like in a fantasy story. So as far as that goes, it is a bit of a longer synopsis. Pitted against one another, with the people and the country they love in jeopardy, the daughter of a deserter and the son of a king have a chance to fulfill their forebears' legacy, or destroy it entirely. Twisted monsters called Saja lurk in the shadows of the mountains. Rumours say the Finalists, human wielders of an ancient elemental magic, again walk the plains. Not all in Avalon believe, and not all welcome the return of legend. Cura's a skeptic, but she'll cross and befriend centaurs, talking animals, and worse, to save her family after the rebellion mistakes her for the land's prophesied saviour. And while he'd rather negotiate with rebels than fight them, Tristan can't ignore prophecy. That was the sham his father used to steal the crown in the first place. Over a century ago, their ancestors sailed the oceans in search of peace and died as heroes fighting for it. But heroes and villains aren't always what they seem to be. Inspired by Sanderson's grounded characters and Tolkien's sense of wonder, Fire of the Forebears is a fantasy for fans who think a dual perspective adventure about the fate of one nation might still be pretty epic. So this one, as I said, it's got lots of things that I really like about it. One of the things that I've really enjoyed in the books that I've read in the past sort of 10, 12 months or so is rebellion, and really focusing on the side of the rebellion as they're rising up against the oppressor. And that's what you get promised here. So that's one of the things that I really liked the sound of. Also, you've got these twisted monsters, you've got the return of magic, you've got centaurs, you've got lots of things in here. Prophecy, you know, it can be hit and miss, but I don't mind it if it's done right. And you've got the old classic heroes and villains. So there's a lot in this synopsis that really sings to me. It's why I picked the book up in the first place when I was offered a review copy. And I'm pleased to say that it's still my favourite synopsis out of the 10 in the final. So that's my ranking anyway. As I say, I've already read now 3 of these books, the 13th Hour, A Touch of Light, and Fire of the Forebears. I'm not going to go through my thoughts on those individually. I will review the 13th Hour in an upcoming video, because I'll try and do that for all of the 10 finalists, or the remaining 7 that I haven't read, plus 8 for that one that I haven't reviewed yet. So when I do that, I'll do my usual 5-star rating for the book. I'll do my usual weighted rating based on my scale, unchanged, as I normally would, and then I'll just throw in an additional figure, a score out of 10, based on the rubric that Casti has put up for this kind of group read of the SPFBO8 finalists. So in the comments below, you know what to do. Let me know which of these you're most looking forward to. If you've read any of them, let me know what you think of them, and which one do you think I'm going to like the most. Are there going to be any surprises, whether that's good or bad? While you're down there, obviously do the usual stuff with liking and subscribing. Check out my social media and support the channel, links in the description box. I'll hopefully see you in the next video sometime soon. But until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.